Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Social Work 12th podcast. And today we're going to be talking about salaries and forensic social work, which I'm really excited. This is the first episode of a series that we're trying out. We'll see how it goes, but I'm calling it the salary series because I know social workers want to hear about salaries. I do. We're nosy, and we also just want to see like the possibilities of like, yeah, what's out there. And so my hope with these episodes is just to bring on people who are, really willing to share their salaries and being transparent about that. I think that's super important for our profession. Um, and yeah, so today's the first episode with Erika, who I met on Instagram, which is so cool, just
Yeah.
randomly. So I
Uh-huh.
posted a salary, I posted a couple salaries on Instagram,
Yeah.
and one of them was a forensic social worker salary. And I
Mhm.
put in the caption, if anyone knows about forensic social work, I don't really know what this means. Can you like reach out to me? So Erica did, and we chatted, and yeah, super fascinating work, and she's very awesome for coming onto the podcast and sharing her salary, and also talking about forensic social work. So I feel like we're getting a two for one here to get into the details of forensic social work, but also what she's making in forensic social work. So thanks for joining me, Erica.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, Taylor. Thanks so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
um, let's start with just like your social work journey and like how you got into forensic social work.
Sure, totally. Well, let's see here. I went to school for social work in I graduated in 2022, May of 2022. I went to school in Colorado at Metropolitan State University of Denver. Um,
That is the longest name.
It's a very long name. And you know what? I was just had the thought of, I was like, normally people in that would say, go whatever their team mascot is.
Yeah.
Because they have some kind of like, affinity, like some kind of association with that. But I was like, wait, what's the mascot again? But I do remember it's Roadrunners.
Okay.
Randomly, Roadrunners.
Random. Okay.
So go Roadrunners. No, I think it's a really great university. And so, and I had been in my 20s and such, I had been, traveling around a bit and doing, various things, various jobs. At some point, I realized that I liked, like, I don't know, being of service to people and felt like, of course, that's a very worthwhile profession. And I think I'm also influenced by my mother, who's in a kind of profession. I also my sister's a teacher and my brother's also in this kind of work, so I think it's just like a family thing too. And so then I kind of like evolved into thinking, oh, I think I would like to go to school for social work. I had my bachelor's from previous in sociology, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to go get my master's in social work. And so so I got my master's. When I was in school, I did take a you know um social work and the legal field kind of class, right? But with that class, I think the kinds of social work in the legal field that were talked about was definitely like, kind of CPS stuff, right? Where
Mm.
you're involved in the courts in that sense. And then also some community courts stuff, or therapeutic courts. And so those are the kinds of courts that, possibly someone has a mental health issue. There's all sorts of these therapeutic courts,
Yeah.
but maybe a mental health issue,
Yeah.
substance use. There's like a veterans court, maybe people who are unhoused, like all these different populations meant
Mm.
to, and it's meant to be a much more like communal kind of therapeutic setting. And so anyways, so that's really what we
So
were
you were
taught
in a
about.
social work and law class, and you guys talked
Yes.
about those kinds of things. Okay,
Yes.
okay, gotcha.
Yes, and my professor in that class was actually, she had like a dual kind of degree, where she was a lawyer and she was also a social worker, which is
Oh,
very
that's
cool
cool.
combo. More
Yeah.
people should do that, which that sounds like a lot of schooling. Um, but yeah, so anyway, so that's how it was proposed to me. Okay, then like when I was looking into what my internships would be, I did my first internship at an organization, Women's Bean Project in Denver. They work with people who, have challenges getting into the workforce for whatever reason, and provide. It's a social enterprise. They provide them a job and then provide them wraparound services to kind of get them on their feet. I did that for my first internship. My second internship, basically, they, um, MSU, so Metro State, has a database. I think a lot of universities do, of partnerships they have with various organizations that people have interned at before. I really was like thinking, oh, I kind of want to do something in the legal field. I think I was, influenced by, a family friend who's a lawyer and does public defense work, and I was like, I kind of would be curious about that. And so I was looking into what kind of partnerships the university has with those kinds of agencies, and I stumbled upon the Alternate Defense Council, like the Office of the Alternate Defense Council. How does that work? Um, and I and so I applied there to be an intern there, and I got the internship. I didn't quite know exactly what it would entail, but I was curious to learn about it. So that was
Yeah.
the
Yeah, that was your
start.
first kind of entry. Yeah.
Yes.
Talk.
Mhm.
Yeah, so let's talk about like what you did there and what you
Yes.
saw and things you learned and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, that sounds good. Yeah. Um, so, I really appreciated, I think generally, I really appreciate that agency, Alternate Defense Council in Colorado. I think they're doing really good work. I think they have really great leadership. I think one thing that I've learned along my social work journey is, if a place is, especially in this kind of thing where it's like, I think this happens a lot to social workers, where we're working in a setting that's not, we're not like the primary providers, like in medical settings. So it's the same with legal settings, where we're not the primary provider, and there's like all this lingo and all this way of doing things that it's like not our
Because like the primary,
expertise.
when you say primary providers, the primary provider are the attorneys,
Exactly.
right? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know I keep going on tangents, but
That's the
just
point
the
of this. I'm
idea.
interviewing you. Yes.
Okay. Good. I'll just keep doing it then. Um, but yeah, so basically what I've learned through my social work journey is, like, if you're interviewing at a place and a social worker isn't there in the interview, if they have like an attorney interviewing you, you're like, I don't, this isn't for me, because you're clearly not social work oriented, and you're not working
Interesting.
from our value system. If you're
When they
having,
were interviewing you as an intern, it was just that the attorneys that were there. The social workers weren't there.
no,
Oh, okay.
no. Since then, I have had ones like that. But
Oh,
no, for
gotcha.
this agency, it was the two head social workers at the
Gotcha.
agency who were interviewing me, and they're both really great. And so yeah, very social work oriented agency.
Awesome.
And so yeah, so I knew, like, yeah, I didn't know exactly about the work, but I feel really grateful for that experience, because basically I had a supervisor, and I started off by just like joining him in some of the work he was doing, right? So just shadowing him, and just like, yeah, like, and then starting to take on more and more of a role until I had my own cases I was working on.
Hmm.
And because in forensic social work, specifically the kind where you're a mitigation specialist, which is what I was and still do, There's like a kind of steep learning curve is what, you hear a lot, is that it's kind of a lot to learn, and it's a lot to navigate at first, but then once you're in it, then, that's why, like, I've heard a few times from various parties, and I would agree that, like, you need such a setting where you have a supervisor, or you have some kind of guidance, you have some kind of training in this work, and you're not, rather than just applying to this job and getting thrown in.
Yeah.
Um,
When you say, did you say mitigation or litigation?
Mitigation.
Mitigation. Okay. Can you
Yeah.
explain what that is?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Definitely. Okay. So basically, the work that a forensic social worker does on defense teams is, so in ADC, how they would work it is, the attorneys would request to have a social worker on their defense team, and basically our role was a few different things. Um, it was to uh, support the client, and so including, like, visiting them in jail. If you're usually, the kinds of clients you end up working with in this mitigation setting have more serious charges, um, because the defense attorney is aiming to make it the most robust defense, and so that's why they bring a social worker on to begin with. So usually, most likely, they'll be in custody, and you'll be visiting them every week in jail. Um, so part of it is support, part of it is a friendly face, part of it is someone who's on their team, um, coming to see them. Because, of course, in that kind of setting, there's a lot of people who see them as a criminal, right? See them as a number.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a very, it can be a very dehumanizing space.
Yeah.
Um, and, various different jails are different in terms of how bad they are.
Right.
Yeah. Some
Yeah.
are better than others, and some have, like, good programming and such, and have, like, mental health support and substance use treatment stuff. But anyway, so the first one is to be a friendly face and offer support, in that sense, not a therapy role, but just to be a friendly face, and also to, address things that maybe is going on for them in the jail, as best you can. And that's the same thing, where different jails are different in terms of how easy or hard they are to actually get in touch with someone who could make a difference for them, or if they'll even respond to you.
Try. Oh, okay.
Yeah, if they'll even try.
What kind of things have your clients, like, requested help with that you needed to reach out to the jails for, or prison? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So, like, for example, like a medication thing might come up, where there was a medication that they were on previous, and they're struggling to get the proper medication currently, and so that you can advocate for them to get on the proper medication.
Gotcha.
Um, but I would say there could be, yeah, all sorts of things that come up. I'm trying to think of what else has come up in the past, but I think I also try to make their time more pleasant for them by, I'll bring them books, because the thing about jail, another tangent, is that, it's like,
It's
with
cold and just
it's
not homey,
cold, and
and
it's, yeah,
just
and it's,
rough.
yeah, exactly. It's rough. It's not homey, and, like, and it's this really uncomfortable time in people's lives for obvious reasons, but also the uncertainty of it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
when you're in jail, you're just waiting to know
Yeah.
what your fate will be, what your sentence will be. So
Yeah.
you don't know, like, how bad, or like, how the length of your prison sentence. You don't know how long it will be. Um, and you don't know what will happen. So I think that's like, that uncertainty is so uncomfortable. And then of course, like, not knowing, like, about, like, seeing your family, just like your future, like, that's, of course, for any of us, that's very uncomfortable. And also, ever since COVID, they have, like, I would say jails across the country don't allow for in-person visits anymore. Like, there's probably some that do, but they don't allow for in-person family visits. And so I think that's something that changed with COVID. But they'll do video visits with family, but that's it. So yeah, so it's an uncomfortable time for them, but as much as possible, I think yeah, trying to be on their team in the sense of, like, talking to them about, like, here we are, like, how can you use this time? Possibly you were in this kind of life situation previous to this. And okay, let's think of, and this is a good time for reflection at the very least, right? This is a good time to think about, who am I? Who do I want to be? And who do I want to associate with, most likely? And these kinds of things can apply in the jail too, because there's people in the jail who are itching to just get right back out and go right back to whatever they were doing before. And then that can lead to just coming back and over, right? Just like
Yeah.
in and out of the system over and over. But like, okay, be careful who you associate within the jail also, because there's people who are like, hold on, I'm going to pause here and I'm going to make a better life for myself. Like, okay, associate with those people. If you
Yeah,
want to change your
definitely.
life, like, you can really change your life. So yeah,
Yeah.
trying to bring them books and maybe like, journaling kind of prompts, those kinds of things to help them think
Hmm.
about all of these kinds of ideas. So
So
yeah, that's
yes.
one part.
So you go, you're going to visit them for to be like a friendly face,
Yes.
trying to maybe do some mini case management for them if they need
Yes,
help with like
exactly.
things from the
Uh-huh.
jail.
Hmm.
What else?
Yeah, and so then really our main role, which I know I've said a lot about everything else, but um, our main role really is the mitigation piece. So it's to gather life history information from the client. Of course, we all know this is very social worky, that the reasons that we get into the various situations we get into is because of where we come from, right? And there's all sorts of influences that bring us to the point where we are. And um, of course, people in these legal settings, they don't just plop down on the earth and end up in jail. There's all sorts of reasons that they've ended up in that setting. And of course, usually it has to do with a trauma history, um, possibly substance use. Um, these things are very common. So yeah, like, there's of course all sorts of things that can influence their histories, right? Or that are from their histories that can influence their present.
Yeah.
And so, like, our job is to get that information, right? Like, gather life history information. And
How
yeah, we do
extensive is
this.
this? How extensive is like is it a
It's
pretty like you're writing pages on pages about this person?
it's very extensive. It depends. I would say the more severe the charges, the more extensive you want to be. My old one of the old social work bosses at the previous agency would talk about, like, overturning rocks, right? And like, how many rocks are you going to turn over in this person's life? And there's a lot of factors that can influence how many rocks you turn over. I would say, in a general way, you try to turn over all the rocks you can. A
Yeah.
lot of times there's restraints, though, like time is usually a restraint. And usually
Like your time to like get all this information.
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
so, and usually, in the court, the attorney, like, there's a clock, a ticking clock, as far as, like,
Yeah.
when these like, court dates are coming up. Attorneys can ask for continuances, but I would say, like, the less severe the charges, the quicker it goes, right?
Yeah.
So, um, and it's all so less severe the charges, the quicker it goes. So usually that's a restraint, and so you can. As far as the how deep you go, it can go very deep. I would say definitely requesting. So, we in order to gather this information, we talk to client, gather life history information from them. We talk to family and friends of theirs, and that they give us permission to talk to, right? It's all defense oriented. It's all, client led and client centered in terms of like they guide us in what they would like us to pursue. And then we also request records. And so on the subject of how deep, like requesting birth records, I regularly request birth records. Even, you know, I haven't ever done this, but people go as deep as to request records about mom, for example, and like
Wow.
her life. And yeah, and like definitely at least pregnancy related, like how was your, talking to mom, how was your pregnancy? Were there any complications, And one thing that's very like unfortunate and can definitely be a reality is that mom was using some kind of substance during pregnancy or drinking during pregnancy. This is very common.
Yeah.
And so, trying to get that kind of information from various sources. And so basically, all of this information is put together into like a social history report, right? Where you, based off of all the information that you've collected, separate the information into mitigation themes. Um,
Interesting.
so
And I for everyone who's listening, I looked
yeah.
up mitigation, and it
Hmm.
means that you're like reducing or trying to lessen the harmful like effect or charges in this situation.
Yes.
So like your
Yeah.
job, just to like wrap my head around this, your
Hmm.
job is to help kind of like get this history and yeah, support the attorneys with trying to get a lessened or no kind of sentence.
Yes. That's
Yeah.
it. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so, yeah, so that's it. So like we these mitigation specialists come in to play usually during plea negotiations. And so it's not, like we wouldn't come into play when client is on track to be going to trial. Um, because, you know, that's kind of a different, well, it's not a different path. It's like that can happen once, if plea negotiations don't go well, right? But, so we come in, yeah, at that point of, plea negotiations usually, and and yeah, the idea is to, this report that we write is given to the prosecutor and given to the judge. And the idea is to humanize the client, right? And help all of these parties that are involved in this client's fate, right? Understand the person more holistically, right? Because the reality is that these people are dealing with a lot of cases, and this client's a piece of paper, right, that has charges,
Yeah.
usually like a criminal history and then their current charges. And it's like, okay, I'm going to judge this person based off
On
of
just
that.
that. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, so it's like you're trying to like help, bring the kind of client's life into the courtroom, and the client's
Wow.
history.
That's
So
a lot
it's like,
of that's a I feel like that's a lot of pressure for you for
yeah,
that role.
it
Yeah.
kind it kind of is. Yeah, it kind of is, because it's a really big deal. But I
Yeah.
think as far as an attorney, just thinking, zooming out, it's like one of the tools in the toolbox, I would say,
Right.
for an attorney, and
Yeah.
like I think it helps, you know, also it helps the attorney understand the client, because often we have way more contact with client than attorney does. So it's like we can also be a point
Oh,
person between attorney and client. And also I've
fascinating.
definitely had many times where I've advocated for client to the, with the attorney.
Yeah.
Um, and just making sure my client's voice is heard with the
I love
attorney,
that. Okay.
and really expressing to client, like, we're here for you. We're working for you. This
Yeah.
is your life. Make
Yeah.
sure that you're getting the representation that you deserve, and that is your constitutional right. Um,
I love that.
so yeah, so it's like, don't just passively accept everything, like, yeah, let's be actively thinking about, like, we want to make sure we're getting good representation. And yeah.
Yeah, that's really that sounds really fascinating. So like day to day for you was like you would have multiple clients and you're just kind of in this process at like a various time with these different clients and just going to see them, and it seems like you're probably managing your own time, and
Yep.
getting kind of this report done because you have like a deadline to get this report in. And does that sound about right?
That's right. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, that's
interesting.
right. Yeah, it's like when you initially, it's interesting because, like, as I'm talking about it, I'm in a similar role now, but it's a bit different than it was when I was in Colorado. Now I'm in Washington. So, but so I'm kind of talking, I think I'm talking more from the perspective of when I was in Colorado and exactly
Yeah,
how the role
yeah.
was approached there. But yeah, so basically, you get on to a case, right? Maybe it's an attorney you've worked with before, and they call you up or email you, and are like, I have a client who I would like a social worker to be on the defense team, and like, are you available? Previous and currently, they're both contract roles, right? Independent contractor roles, right? And so the one previous was a little bit more structured than the one I'm in now. The one previous, like, it was like an actual, like, kind of yearly contract, right? You get paid hourly. You keep track of your hours, and you get paid for mileage, and you get paid for driving time, and
Yeah, let's start let's pause there. So
okay.
you were I know your history here a little bit. So
Mhm.
you were in this internship, you
Yes.
graduate,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
then
Okay, yeah, good point.
you're like, I want to work here. Or they were like, hey, do you want a job? How did that go?
Yeah, totally. So I was in the internship, and I liked it, and I had a supervisor, and I was, yeah, going to graduate. And so basically, when I was getting ready to graduate, I applied to be a contract worker. Um, and they already knew me, right? But I
Yeah.
still had the whole process, and I had references and everything. And yeah, so I got the contract role, and I hit the ground running, right? Like, my
Totally.
contract
Because they're like, you
technically,
already know this.
yeah, I already know this. My contract technically started the day after I graduated, because as soon as I graduated, then that made me eligible to, like, be paid basically. And
Oh, that's cool. Okay, so
mhm.
let's talk about the contract. Let's get into the money now. Let's talk about your contract
Yes.
and what they
Uh-huh.
offered you
Sure.
hourly and how that works
Uh-huh.
and everything. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
sure, sure. Yeah, so back in the day, back in Colorado at ADC, when I first started, me saying that I was able to start as soon as I graduated, I was making, so my initial amount was $44 an hour.
Okay.
So that's a contract rate. So that means, that I don't get any benefits, right? I didn't get any,
Right.
there's no benefits. The one benefit that ADC does offer, which is actually a really bomb benefit, is supervision towards licensure, right?
Oh, that is really cool.
Free supervision.
Nice.
So that was actually really helpful.
Nice. So I did the
Yeah,
math on that. $44 an hour for, if you were working 40 hours a week, that's $91,000, 500. So, I mean, that was in what year?
so that was in 2022.
2022. I mean, thinking about post grad, out of your first job out of grad school, making 91,000, and I realized, like, you're not getting the benefits, but like even still, I feel like a lot of people are looking at
60, right?
50 to
Mm-hmm.
60.
Yeah, easy. Mm-hmm. For sure.
And, if you're having to pay for your insurance and like, maybe
Yes.
uh, contribute
Mm-hmm.
to retirement and stuff, that still is
Right.
more
All
money
those
than you
things.
could have
Mm-hmm.
gotten. Like,
Yes.
yeah, that is
Yeah.
really cool.
And that's the thing about forensic social work too, I would say, and and that's like kind of why we're here, is I think it can be a very well paid field, and well paid and in high demand. I would say like the more I'm in this work, the more, like, because I would say as a country, and the bar association, all these, like, they all are like, we're all going towards this holistic defense, is what it's called, is like defense that's oriented towards, like, people have needs. Yes, legal needs is one of them. Here they are in this legal situation, but they have other needs that need to be addressed in
Absolutely.
order for them to not be in this situation again. And so that kind of mentality is, and that kind of philosophy, like legal philosophy, is really, um,
Like on
like
the
now
rise.
on the
Wow.
rise. Yeah.
Wow.
And I would say is becoming more best practice. So, anyways, I think the field will just keep getting bigger and bigger, and, like, more this kind of forensic social work and mitigation specialists will, and social workers in defense will be just more and more. But yeah, so I started there at 44, but then, like, on the subject of salary, it went up really quick. I think their fiscal year is like June, something like that. I think it was actually as quick as, like, well, no, maybe it was 1 year. I'm trying to remember. But anyways, mine, and then it was 44, but then I went up to 55, like
My
like pretty quick.
goodness. And that's
Yeah.
within 1 year. Wait. I'm doing the math real quick for everyone.
Yeah.
$55 an hour is $114,000, 400 if you're working 40 hours a week.
Yes.
Um, that is amazing. And also that is like that should be around what everyone is making out of grad school. I just want to
Mm-hmm.
everyone who's
Mm-hmm.
listened to this podcast up to this point knows that I believe social workers need to be paid more, but that is so cool. But I know that you were saying, I mean, when Eric and I were talking before, were you billing 40 hours a week? Like, what is kind of the average that you're billing? That's the
Yeah,
thing.
that's the thing. That's the thing, is that role in Colorado, their whole thing was like, you can work as much as you want. Like, you can work 80 hours a week if you want.
Right,
Um
because an attorney is calling you and saying, "Hey, like, are you available? Are
yes.
you available?" That's kind
Hmm.
of it's kind of interesting. Now it's really clicking, um,
Hmm.
because you're the contractor,
Hmm.
and if they have a case, they're like, "Okay, I'm gonna call Erica. Or I'm gonna call this other person, and you
Yes.
can take it or you can say no," and then they would just call
Yes.
someone else.
Exactly.
I see. So
Hmm.
yeah, if you're just
Yep.
like, "Yeah, I can take it. I can take it. I can take
Yep.
it," you can work 40
That's
hours a week.
exactly it. Right,
Mm,
exactly. Yeah. So it's like you can take on as much as you want, as much or as
yeah.
little as you want. So you can make it like a part-time role if you want, or like full-time, or extra way a lot ton, full-time. So,
Yeah.
post, like plus plus. And yeah, so yeah, you can work as much as you want, but yeah, it's like, for me, and like before, so I have kids, I have two kids, and this was when my daughter was, little, she's 5 now, but yeah, she was what, 2, at the time. She was in a daycare setting, but of course that made it so I wasn't always like able to work, and so I definitely wasn't working 40 hours a week, maybe 30, like a good week, like, like, okay, like if I'm really getting after it, it was like 30 probably. Um
But that's cool that you can kind of have, it's you have sort of some autonomy. You're kind of like a business owner in a way. You're like, I mean, like you're like a
mhm.
contractor, consultant,
Yes.
where you can
Yeah,
decide
you're
like yes or
yep.
no, and that's really cool.
Yep. It is, and I would say I think that's a real benefit to this work. The drawbacks, or like, just, and by this work, I mean like being an independent contractor. It's like
Yeah.
you get to pick your own hours, is the idea. It's like the idea of being a contractor. You provide your own materials, and you pick your own hours. But So, and that's really helpful, especially when you have kids or something. And, in a normal job, you have a kid's doctor's appointment or a personal doctor's appointment, and you have to like take time off, or it's like feels complicated. And like, but, being a contract worker, you can be like, I can do whatever I want. Like, I don't have to work today. Um, of course, like there are like deadlines, like I said, there are things you need to get done, but,
Right.
but that's on your own timeline. That's on your own, like, okay, when can I get
Yeah.
that done? You can work the weekends or whatever if you want.
I love
Um,
that. So
yeah,
in your
so I think
current
that,
role, oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
Mhm. Yeah, so that's it. I was just gonna say, yeah, I think it can be really helpful. Hmm.
Yeah. In your current role, so how long did you work there?
I worked there until I moved to Washington. I moved to Washington in February of 2024.
So it was like
So
2-ish years.
2-ish years, 2.5 years.
Yeah. And then moving to Washington, and what was your starting salary then?
Yes. So now in Washington, I have two different roles. I am doing two different contract roles. One is through the Washington State Office of Public Defense. Um, I think a really interesting thing moving from Colorado to Washington is like realizing like, wow, like things operate completely differently here. Like
Yeah.
how tax dollars are used here versus in Colorado is just different. Not worse, but just different. And like how social services are approached, how like where money is put is interesting. So the Washington State Office of Public Defense, they have really specific programs to serve like fairly specific populations. It's in Colorado. This agency I was a part of, it was tax dollar funded, um, taxpayer funded, but it was a lot more general and a lot more like attorneys, social workers, any kind of case, any kind of yeah, any kind of client, could we could work with. Washington State Office of Public Defense, serves really specific kind of their different programs serve really specific populations. So one of my roles is with this new program. It's the acronym is SPAR, Simple Possession, Advocacy, and Representation. It's a program where it's a very social worky. It's still like forensic social work, but it's different than the mitigation role, where I'm working with people who have substance use possession, public use charges, and doing resourcing for them, case management, that kind of classic social work stuff. And they just have to have these kinds of charges. And the idea is the same thing. I'm working with their defense attorney, their public defense attorney. And the idea is like attorney refers client to me because client has some, um, you know, broader needs, and they could have they need some support with, right?
Yeah.
They could use some help with. And so very social work, very like case management-y, right? That's one of my roles, but still in the defense world. And then my other role is with in Pierce County, where I live. It's the Department of Assigned Counsel. It's their local public defense office. In Washington State, different than Colorado, like it's very patchworky. Like each jurisdiction has their own setup, their own system for addressing public defense. And they're mostly on the hook for paying for it too. It's kind of a problem. It's definitely a problem. But so it means like definitely public defense is underfunded here, I would say generally. But yeah, so this local public defense office, I'm doing some mitigation work for them. It's a lot less structured. It's a lot less hand holding, like people holding my hand.
Yeah, like
um,
if you didn't have the experience that you had before, it would be a little bit more
it would
difficult.
be impossible. No, I've
Yeah,
had like
okay.
no guidance. I've had
Okay.
like no guidance. I was just, this one is very much they're approaching it like you're a professional,
Do
like,
you should know what to do.
yeah, you should know what to do, but like they're hiring me on as a contract, like, like add like a case by case basis, right? Like as a
Yeah.
contractor, you provide this service for us. We'll pay you for it. That's the end of our relationship.
Wow,
You know,
I see. Versus like in
yeah,
Colorado, it was kind of
yeah,
like you're within the team and
yes,
we can show you the ropes a little bit, but I mean,
exactly.
caveat that you had like the internship there, but it sounds
Uh-huh.
like they were a little bit more supportive
Yes.
environment where if you were a new social worker, they would train you.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. You're a new social worker, they train you over there.
Yeah.
They do not
Yeah.
train you here. But
Yeah.
that being said, I actually think, if people are interested, they can be in touch with me if they live in Pierce County here around here. But like, because actually I got in touch with that Department of Assigned Counsel on a whim, and I just said, I didn't see anywhere on their website or anything that they have social workers on defense teams. I got in touch with them, asked if they have mitigation specialists. They were like, no, not really, but we do have investigators who do some mitigation work. Let me put you in touch with our investigator, our head investigator. So I was in touch with the head investigator, and he's like, yeah, we do need people to do mitigation work, sure. And so then I got put on this like panel, is what they call it. And it's basically, I think I'm actually the first social worker on this panel. It's like all investigators who do mitigation work sometimes, and I'm the one that's
Oh,
like purely mitigation, which is a
interesting.
new thing for this agency. But I think, like I was saying, I think it'll be picking up across, across Washington. I know in Seattle, in the King County office, they have a whole mitigation team, a whole social worker team. They're a
Yeah.
lot more evolved than this one is. Like
Yeah. Okay.
they have yeah, they're really like established. They have a whole, and they're all like salaried like social workers on doing mitigation work in King County, Seattle. But
That's
here
cool.
in Tacoma, like
Yeah,
they're
not
not
so
as
much.
set up.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
what's for the two roles that you're in now, what are you getting paid hourly?
Sure, yeah. So for the one, the SPAR one through OPD, through Washington State Office of Public Defense, it's I get 45 an hour, similar, right, where
Mhm.
it's based off of how much work I'm doing. But that one's a lot more hand holding. That one's a lot more like I have a supervisor, like I have like it's a lot more structured, and we're a team, that kind of
Okay.
thing. But it's
Okay.
still contract. And then my other one ranges depending on the severity of the case, or like the severity of the charges, right? I don't. I think that's from like an investigator point of view. I think from a mitigation point of view, it's like, why would you pay me differently based off of what the charges are? But like,
Yeah.
I think for investigators, that kind of structure makes sense, I guess. But I'm technically like paid as an investigator at DAC, but I get paid. It's a range of like, I think it's like 75 to 95 or something in there per
Okay.
hour. Um,
That's pretty good.
and
That's really good. But how many
yeah,
hours are you putting in for them a week?
that's the thing, is that I've had in total since I've been there, which I started in kind of April, I would say. I've been on a total of 5 cases, four, and it varies of how much I'm putting in per week. It's the same like I was saying before, as far as like, in the I feel like I didn't actually explicitly say this before, but in the beginning you're requesting records a lot, and like that can be time intensive.
Yeah.
And then just meeting with client can be time intensive. But what's more time intensive is at the end when you're writing the report and doing all that. That can be a lot of time. So um, I don't know, it really varies, but like 10 hours a week, probably,
Yeah.
maybe more, maybe 15.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
what I'm aiming for, is like not, because I'm trying to balance both roles. So I want to be
Totally.
able to, yeah, like do both of them fairly. So yeah, 10, 15 hours a week, but it
I
depends
mean,
on how many cases I get
that's
on.
reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Hmm.
pretty decent for like being paid that high.
Hmm.
I don't
Hmm.
think you answered this
Yeah.
before, but like how on
Yes.
average, how long are your reports? Just
Yes.
I'm curious.
Right.
How long?
Yeah. Sure. I could even, I don't know if this would be interesting, because I could send you like a redacted report, but yeah, like I don't know, 10 pages, something like that, 15
Oh
pages,
my
something like
gosh,
that.
I was
Yeah.
not expecting that.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
lengthy. You like
That's
consolidate
yeah.
all this information, like
That's
of like
intense.
their whole life, and yeah, and separate it into like mitigation themes, and like, and
Wow.
yeah, it's a lot, and you're, yeah, basically putting together all this different information that you collected to like tell this story.
That's fascinating. And this is cool. I think um yeah, it seems like there's a lot of potential here for a social worker. So, I think
Yes.
you had kind of a unique path where you had this internship that was like
Hmm.
forensic social work, but
Hmm.
for people who are, you know, didn't have that experience but are curious
Yes.
about
Yes.
maybe exploring this path,
Yes.
like how do you get in?
Yes. I would say, yeah, like if you can get in when you're in school, that's great, like I
Hmm.
did. I think that's great. But if not, you can, I would say they're like ADC in Colorado, there's agencies you can be hired on after, you graduate. Um, and like they'll train you. So I
Yeah.
would say get into, versus my current role, but like get into an agency where they'll train you, and
Yeah.
that definitely exists.
Like a defense
um
agency.
yes, exactly, I
Yeah.
would say a
Okay.
public defense office.
Okay.
um and so and like so in so yeah, and the I think across the country, like how defense is operated, and just how it's kind of uh like separated, I guess, the different offices, it varies, I think. But in Colorado, like they had public defense offices for each jurisdiction, and then they had this alternate defense counsel, which handles all of the conflict cases. So if there's two people who are involved in the same crime, and the public defense office, the local pub, they represent one of the people, then there needs to be another office that handles the conflict case, because the same office can't represent both of the people. So that's why the alternate defense counsel is present. But usually there's those two kinds of offices present in each jurisdiction, in each state, because there needs to be conflict counsel just in case there's two people who need to be represented. So yeah.
What other roles? So there's the mitigation specialist.
Hmm.
What's your role? The yeah, the title of your role at the wrap.
Yeah,
What's it called?
the SPAR,
The
the
spar.
SPAR.
Yeah. What's
Um, it,
your title
it's
there?
it's it's like social service worker.
Social
It's
service
like,
worker. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not even you. And for that one, you don't need your master's to be in it or anything. Also, side note, in Colorado, they had a role that was like a resource advocate, is what they called it, and that was for social workers who don't have their masters. Of course, you could have your masters if you did, but for bachelor level social workers to also work on these defense teams and do resource navigation for clients, as well as release planning, right? So that can also be really helpful for the court, for them to see like this, there's a plan, this, we're possibly going to release this person into probation, but we don't want them to go right back into the lifestyle they were in before. Like, what's the plan? Where are they
Yeah.
going to live? What's their job going to be? Are they going to do some kind of training? So anyways, there's that kind of role in Colorado for bachelor level social workers. And this one that I'm in now is also, you can be a bachelor level social worker for sure. And
So when you were looking for those jobs, you
mhm.
just like I don't know, you just type in public aid defense agency, in Google, or I feel like you're a little bit more, you kind of know what to like what
Yes.
websites to go to. You're looking at the city websites, or like what tips do
Yeah,
you have
exactly.
there?
I would say looking at the city websites. I would say getting in touch, or like looking at the public defense offices and seeing how they're structured. Um, when I was initially coming to Washington, I'm like, oh, they'll have the exact same setup as Colorado. Like, they're both progressive states, which I would say this is like oh, this way of looking at defense is definitely a more progressive perspective, and actually putting resources and money into having social workers on defense teams. It usually means the state has to be fairly progressive and open
That's
to
a good
this.
point. Yeah. Yeah. So it might not be
It,
available really everywhere.
it might not, yeah,
Hmm.
where you are, but I think there's different. Oh, I think across the country there's opportunities. But anyways, like I looked I heard about this Washington State Office of Public Defense statewide office. I was like, wonder what they do. Okay, like I looked into them further, and actually one thing I did do that really led me to my current role at SPAR is I posted in a like PNW Facebook social workers Facebook group and said and like described like the kind of work I was doing in
You're in the
Colorado and
PNW Social Workers Facebook group. I'm in the
yeah,
PNW. What Facebook group is this?
I don't know. I think it's called
You have to send it to me.
PNW social work. Yeah, I'll have to send it to
Oh my gosh. That's so
you.
funny.
Yeah, and now, side note, I think you could probably definitely find more, so, social workers to interact with, right? Like to
Yeah. Yeah.
be in
To
touch with,
chat with,
like
for sure.
chat with on there. Yeah, and so there was one person on there. I just posted like about a little bit about what I was doing in Colorado and just asking, what do you all recommend? Where should I go for this kind of work, or what, are there other options, and I had some people reply. This one woman was really proactive and like getting in touch with me and saying, telling me about where she works. And then she was like, what I would do also if I were you? She's like, there's this person who works at OPD, Office of Public Defense, and like, and get in touch. I would get in touch with him and ask him about it. So I did, and then that led him. Said he told me that the SPAR program was going to get
Oh,
started, and he's like, and here's the person who's starting the program. She's getting it up and running. You should be in
I
touch with
love
her.
that. I
So I got
love
in touch
that.
with her, and then she was like, yeah, we're hiring social workers. Great, yeah, like come on board. Um,
That's
and so yeah,
awesome.
so I would say look at statewide offices, look at local, like how public defense is being provided locally in your area, and see about if they have mitigation specialists, if they have social workers, and like I did here, possibly like get in touch, like to ask them if this is a thing that they do, uh,
Yeah,
because possibly,
I love that you
yeah,
put yourself out there and was just like, "Hey, I'm moving here. I don't know. This is what I did.
is
Like,
this a
anyone
thing?
have any tips?" I think
Yeah.
that's
Oh
been
yeah.
kind of
Uh-huh.
a theme with just people on the
Yeah.
podcast, and it's
Oh
just,
yeah.
us social workers, we want to help other social workers, and sometimes you got to put out your, I don't know, but just put it out there and see what happens. So, I love that.
Yeah, put it out there, see what happens. And yeah, and I think, like I said, asking the questions, like you're on the right track. And I would say any attorney, any defense attorney, and working in criminal defense, this won't be a foreign concept to them. Like they'll get that this is a thing where like
Yeah,
holistic defense, I think, is becoming best practice, like I
absolutely.
said. So like the suggestion of social workers being on defense teams, I think generally they'll be like, yeah, that's we
Yeah,
understand what that means.
yeah, totally.
Mostly.
Awesome.
So
Well, this was great. Thank you so much, Erica, for joining us and sharing your salary. I mean, and about forensic social work. That's super
yeah,
fascinating, and
of
one of the
course.
topics that I feel like we just didn't really talk about in school. I mean, you did, you kind of did, but yeah, something that I never heard about. So, really appreciate you being here. All right, everyone, thanks for listening, and we'll be back in 2 weeks.